Tonight, Front Page Challenge welcomes the outspoken Negro leader, Malcolm X.
You've called people like Martin Luther King an Uncle Tom.
Today, Martin Luther King is just a 20th century or modern Uncle Tom. We don't endorse anything that's advocated by Martin Luther King.
You're quoted as having said when an airliner crashed that you were glad it happened.
And when that plane crashed in France, and we learned that 120 of them were from the state of Georgia, why, to me, it couldn't have been anything but an act of God, a blessing from God, and I pray for similar blessings from him as often as he can spare them.
Today, we're talking about a man who is one of, if not the most influential black leaders during the Civil Rights era. He instilled black pride in African Americans and voiced the concerns of the African American community in a way that people like Martin Luther King could never do. The influence that Malcolm X would have on black culture is unmistakable, but he wasn't a civil rights leader, despite what other people say about him. In fact, for most of his time in the spotlight, Malcolm X despised the civil rights movement. Malcolm X steps out onto the world stage in a documentary called The Hate That Hate Produced.
The Hate That Hate Produced. A study of the rise of black racism, of a call for black supremacy among a small but growing segment of the American Negro population. But of even more interest to New Yorkers is Malcolm X, the Muslims' New York minister.
Now, does this mean that the white man by nature is evil?
By nature, he is evil.
He cannot do good.
We don't have any historic example where we have found that they collectively, as a people, have done good.
The documentary shows the rise of black nationalism in the USA, and it focuses mainly on the Nation of Islam. And one of the people that appears in it is Malcolm X. Malcolm X is a member of the Nation of Islam from 1952 to 1964. Now, the Nation of Islam isn't Islam. It's UFOs. They believe white people are the actual literal devil. So it's a little bit bonkers. Putting all of that aside, the main thing they advocate for is self-defense in black communities and black nationalism, the actual creation of a black country in the Americas. So what was Malcolm's position in the nation? Well, he was a preacher. He recruited a lot for the Nation of Islam. He gave lots of lectures and lots of speeches, and he pointed out a lot of the injustices against the Nation of Islam and injustices against the black community.
Every case of police brutality against a Negro follows the same pattern. They attack you, bust you all upside your mouth, and then take you to court and charge you with assault. And those of you who are familiar with it, know that in America, democracy is hypocrisy.
So why do so many people think he's a civil rights leader? He must have had some sort of interaction with civil rights leaders, right? He must have gone to marches or protests. He must have been organizing these things. No, he didn't. And he seemed to be incredibly vocal about his distaste of civil rights.
We don't endorse anything that's advocated by Martin Luther King.
While he's in the nation, Malcolm X's position on civil rights, on what's happening in the 1950s and 60s, is the same as the nation's. One of the big tenets of the civil rights movement is the non-violence, the public disobedience. For most of Malcolm X's time in the public eye, he doesn't want anything that the civil rights movement seems to want. And he advocates for a lot of things that are in complete contrast to the civil rights movement. He doesn't want to work together with white people. He wants separation. He also doesn't want to advocate for non-violence. He sees his people being violently attacked in the streets, violently attacked regularly, and so he doesn't think it's right for people to disarm when they're being attacked.
Just get a rifle and a shotgun, but don't attack anybody with it. But if anybody makes any kind of move whatsoever to violate your property or the lives of your family, you should die like a man, no matter what the odds against you are.
Despite all of that, and despite the fact that he wasn't a civil rights leader, he may have become one. Throughout 1963, Malcolm X becomes disillusioned with the movement, and especially the leader of the movement, Elijah Muhammad.
This coming destruction of the white man, will there be any bloodshed involved in this, or will it be a complete mental thing?
There will be plenty of bloodshed.
Have you ever been accused, sir, of preaching hate?
Yes.
Do you think you are preaching hate?
No.
Elijah Muhammad had been caught up in several scandals, including extramarital affairs with underage girls. As well as this, he was working with white supremacists to buy land. And while it seems kind of weird that black nationalists and white supremacists would work together, in a way you can kind of get the logic, right? Bonkers. Elijah Muhammad had met with the KKK to get funding. At one point, the KKK was the largest funder of the Nation of Islam. And so Elijah Muhammad for 10 years received money from a very wealthy white supremacist, Haroldson L. Hunt, and working with the American Nazi Party. In fact, he actually invited the leader of the American Nazi Party to speak at one of his churches, which you'd imagine went over as well as you'd expect. But Malcolm X was also a challenge for Elijah Muhammad. He was the most visible part of the Nation of Islam. It seemed like many supported Malcolm X above the church itself. And then famously, Malcolm X made a comment about JFK's assassination, as well as several other events.
Malcolm X, you were involved in a controversy some months ago with your leader. Is that over?
I said the chickens came home to roost, and which means the same thing. Climate of hate means that this is the result of something.
You feel, however, that we're making progress?
No. I will never say that progress is being made. Knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches. There's no progress. You pull it all the way out, that's not progress. The progress is healing the wound that the blow made. And they haven't even begun to pull the knife out, much less try and heal the wound. They won't even admit the knife is there.
In March of 1964, Malcolm X would announce his split from the Nation of Islam. And immediately, he goes overseas, he goes on his Hajj, he goes to Mecca. While on his pilgrimage, it changes his view on race. He sees white Muslims, Middle Eastern Muslims, black Muslims, all coming together to one place. It's a really big turning point in how he views race back at home. He also visits several other countries. He goes to France, he goes to the UK. When he comes back, he is a substantially different person from the person who left the USA. He also converts to Sunni Islam, so he kind of leaves the cuckoo bonkers Nation of Islam stuff behind. One of the reasons why I mentioned the month and the year is because I need you to realize that the next events happen in less than a year's time, in about 11 months' time. The first thing is that he reaches out to civil rights leaders and apologizes to Martin Luther King. He sees that the Civil Rights Bill gets passed, with LBJ pushing that through. Future video on that will be tagged at the top. He's open to working with the civil rights movement. And he's also open to working with crack-ass hotkeys. White people, you know, the devil. He establishes a new organization to fight for black people's rights. And just as everything seems to really be kicking off,
apparently 2 men approached the speaker's rostrum and discharged shots at him from apparently very close range.
As I turned around quickly, and the next thing I saw was Malcolm falling back in a dead faint.
I heard shots, and I saw people crawling on the floor. I saw someone look in amazement to the front. I knew they had shot my husband.
How many immediately? No, he wasn't dead immediately, but expired very shortly thereafter.
11 months, less than 1 year, is how long Malcolm X is outside of the Nation of Islam. At one of his speeches, there is a distraction which draws his bodyguards away. An armed gunman storm the stage and they murder Malcolm X. There's no conclusive evidence on who orders the killings or why he was assassinated. All three of the charged men are part of the Nation of Islam. What's with the X thing? Is that like a power-up? I don't know. 2 of the convictions have just been overturned because of a bunch of evidence that was withheld during the trial. So only 1 man is convicted. That would end Malcolm X and his part in history. You should have probably been able to put it together while we were going through the video, but Malcolm X isn't a civil rights leader. For most of his time in the public eye, for just shy of 12 years, he is actively anti-civil rights. He's actively anti-Martin Luther King. And for 11 months after he leaves the Nation of Islam, he is maybe warming up to it. But this doesn't disregard the changes that he made or the impact that he had. We shouldn't be trying to shove every black leader into boxes and looking at a time where the civil rights was at its peak and going, well, if you were black and you advocated for black people's rights, then you must have been a civil rights activist. That just isn't the case. And we should recognize the impact that Malcolm X had because he was outside of the civil rights movement. There's not one thing you can point to and say that is the thing that Malcolm X did. Malcolm X didn't create any new laws. He wasn't part of any pushes for legislation. What he did was he changed black culture. A quote that I think really sums up Malcolm X's influence comes from James Cone. King was a political revolutionary. Malcolm was a cultural revolutionary. Malcolm changed how black people thought about themselves. Before Malcolm came along, we were all Negroes. After Malcolm, he helped us become black. If you liked the video, if you enjoyed it, if you learned something, if you cut yourself shaving like I did several times, then chuck me a like, throw me a subscribe, leave a comment. You know, it all kind of helps the YouTube machine push things through. But that's all I have for you guys today, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.